of exploring the vision of what is Nordicity through the vision of women writers, and also sharing our thoughts about men-woman parity in our countries of the North, where there is where there is supposed to be balance, which is something we can discuss about today. I have organized this project with the support of the Nordic Council of Ministers of Quebec and the Arts and Literature Council of Quebec, the Francophone province of Canada, where I live. And no, not everybody talks English in Quebec. I do, I'm a translator. Anne Miller, who you will hear also today, does too, but a lot of people don't talk English at all. It's kind of a resistance thing, I think, for not being assimilated in this big Northern American, largely speaking in English continent. I am the founder of a writer association and also the publisher of the poetry magazine FEMMES de PAROLE, which would translate in English as Women of Their Word. I see myself as a bridge woman, like a woman that brings together different languages when I put on my hat of being a translator, that brings together artists of different disciplines when we do multidisciplinary projects, and also that bring community together to do artistic projects that are very often anchored in social issues. I have been an event organizer for many years. Only last year, we organized 52 events in the year with very little budget and very little means. And I mostly like to work out of big cities because often art is very concentrated in the big cities, and there's not much of an offer outside of big cities, and I'm a strong believer in decentralization of art. As you can see, I'm French speaking. So, I guess one could also say that I'm a strong believer in the democratization of art. Today, I would like to talk with you about the poetry magazine I created and the special answers it tries to bring, how it's trying to answer to the question of men-women parity in literature. I will explain briefly how and why I created this magazine, and I will share with you the biggest outline, not in details, but the big outlines of a major study that was done in Quebec in 2019. So that's really not long ago. And the conclusion it came, it brought forward. But before I do that, I would like to read you something that was published in the first issue we did. Every issue of our magazine has a section that pays tribute to a woman that is passed away, that deceased from a woman poet. So far, it's always been women poets of Quebec, because women are very fast erased of the history of literature, and I think it's really important we remember them and we talk about the impact they have had on our work. So in that section that is in every issue, it's called Écho and Résonance, and it has there are men as well as women writing in that section. It's a tribute to a woman and we like to invite men who read poetry written by women and who appreciate it to be part of the magazine. So it's a magazine that is putting forward women's work, but in an inclusive way. So the poem I'm going to read now is a tribute to Luki Bersianic. She was the first one we honored. She was the first woman in Quebec to write a novel, a feminist novel, which is amazing. It's a story of an extraterrestrial being that appears in all kind of places in the world, like Jesus at the time, and it's looking for the male being of its species all over the universe, and it comes on Earth and it observes how we live, and it makes all kind of comments, and it's a bit structured like the Bible in certain ways. So it's really interesting, and it has a lot of famous quotes. One of them, I have to think of it, translated in when a man is crazy, people say it's a genius, and when a woman is a genius, people say she's crazy. That's a quote from that novel. That's the Le Guillion talking. So I also chose to read that poem because we are near a lake with so many islands, and this is a poem that talks about a woman who is an island. And I'm gonna read it in French and in English because I'm francophone, so I'm gonna read in both. So the title is Il, dit-elle. I lend, she says. Île bercée, couvée d'effluves marins, écoute l'eau lécher ses frontières, ne sait d'où elle vient, croit avoir été de tout temps, telle qu'elle, bulle en mer. Gently rocked island, wrapped in marine fragrances, listens to water licking her frontiers, doesn't know where she comes from, believes she has been of all times as now, bubble at sea. Île, sein blond à la face du soleil, entre bras de mer comprise, de volcanique terre-mer, de voie lactée issue, enfant de la matrie, il est une femme parlante. Island, fair bosom, facing the sun, between sea sounds embraced, stemmed from volcanic Mother Earth, from the Milky Way, child of feminine lineage. Island is a woman that speaks. Ce que la mer perd de territoire, whatever ground the sea loses, ce que le ciel lui de destin prédéterminé, carte ancienne des astres aujourd'hui éteint, whatever the sky illuminates of predetermined destinies, ancient map of stars today extinguished. Il ne saurait se réduire à cela. Island could never be reduced to that. Croissante, décroissante, noire, waning, waxing, black. La lune le sait bien, the moon knows, n'est partiel que son reflet. Only a reflection is partial. Il l'écrit à pleine page, refuse le livre des limites, tire à elle l'horizon des possibles, l'étend comme drap clair. Island writes it out on her shores, refuses the book of limits, pulls inward the horizon of possible, lays it flat as a clear sheet. Terra incognita of birds and bayous, rameaux naissant, emerging branch, gouffre et éruption, abyss and eruption. Il, parole au vent, pollinise le monde. Island, song in the wind, pollinates the world. Island, Island. Il voyage à elle, femme de lettres, insulaire et constellante, d'origine oblitérée. Island travels to them. Woman of letters, insular and constellating, of obliterated origin. Au cœur du continent du E, muet. Cette moisson de mots invités du large ensemence les côtes at the core of the muted continent. Her harvest of words, invited from afar, sows the coasts. The rose of the winds holds its breath. Voilà, voilà la route parcourue. Here the distance covered, le chemin à faire, the road to come still, la voie femme, the way of women, langage à inventer, language yet to be invented. Sur la grève, la majuscule vient à la fin. On the shore, the capital letter only comes at the end. Il poursuit, essaie de créer homme, femme, ensemble, cherche le couple, Dieu. Island moves on, tries to create men, women together, searches for the sacred couple. Le Saint-Esprit, Saint, 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 Saint. Holy Spirit, Saint, 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 Saint. La Sainte Intuition, Saint, 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 Saint. The Saint Intuition, Saint, 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 Saint. Son and daughter, sisters and brothers. Portée de mer, à son appel, elles émergent, archipel, carried by the sea, to her call, they surface, archipelago. they, her sisters, marching feminarium. Celebrate sa voix. Celebrate her voice arborescente. Island, leafy and lavish. The eldest first. Les aînés devant, les vivantes, les trépassées, the living ones, the passed away, aidantes de mère en fille, caregivers from mother to daughter, nés d'efforts conjugués à ce forêt espace, born from efforts united to bear space. Les voici! Here they are! La nappe est mise à la table de parole. The tablecloth is set on the table of speech. Il, dit-elle. I, Len. She says, she says, she says, says. So, tribute to Luki Bersianik and for all women of speech. So, the magazine I created has two sections. As I said, it has a section called Echo and Resonance, and the other section is called Bridges. And what we do is we ask a woman poet to choose another woman poet of her country, whom she feels she has, that she likes her writing, that she feels some kind of a link in writing. So, and then the first one presents poems and also a text talking about the trace of the other person's writing, the other woman's writing in her own. And then the second, the woman she chose, also write poems, and then also a text about another woman who's not going to be in the magazine. So it's like a bridge. And we put two duos of Quebec with two duos of outside of Quebec. So with that, we're trying to bring forward, not only put women texts together, but show to enhance, give value, show the trace of women's work in other women's work. And in the second section I described, also in men and women's work, the legacy. So it's really a lot of work about the trace of women's work, and that's not something I felt that you see or hear about very often. So, and what I find also is interesting in building the poetry magazine that way is that we choose the first poets, but they choose the second one. And we always ask that they give us 3 names. And if there is one of them I don't know, it's the one I'm going to choose, because for me it's the most interesting one. If we ask the first poet, it's because we find her work interesting. And if she knows somebody we don't know about, we think that's the one we should be putting forward. So that's the whole idea of the magazine. And why I created this magazine? Well, it had to do with things, I mean, it's like 30 years I'm publishing now, mon Dieu, and long time. And I really felt there was a need for a woman poetry magazine, and also I did poetry events that were putting women together the way I just described. And we were inviting one, who chose the other, and then we invited the public to write, to come in an open mic and read something, but it had to have a connection with the work of one or the other of the poets that were invited. So it was already all something that had to do with legacy and link. And I loved those events. I mean, we did all kind of events, but I really liked what came out of those events. It was so moving. And I realized that that's the time when I realized, I just came with the idea like that one day and we did it. And then I realized, my God, it's not often I get to hear that. And it was really special. So that's how I started the idea of the magazine. But then I thought, oh no, I'm not going to do that on top of the rest. It's like, I'm not going to have any time to write at all anymore. And but then there was this study that came out. It was published in 2018. It was the Union of Writers of Quebec that mandated a university to do the study. So it was done over 3 years. It's a very extensive study. And when it came out, I was shocked. I mean, after all those years, I had not realized, I thought Quebec was much more parity in literature than it actually had. And I was a writer myself, but I never thought that what certain things that were happening had to do with the fact that statistically my chances were less. I thought it's because my work was not good enough, or they did not like it, or whatever reason. And all kind of things. The study gave me a perspective on my 30 years of professional life. And a lot of people were upset about it. Me, I was exhilarated. I felt so good because then I realized that a lot of things that I had taken personally maybe had nothing to do with me, So, I was raised in my education. I was raised by parents that never made me feel that I was something I could not do because I was a girl. No. So I came out of my education having this illusion that I live in a country where the chances are the same for women and men. And it really took me a long time that it starts sinking in, not with literature, but with other things. No, it was not the same. If I wanted to start a company, have credit in a bank, and so on and so on. So, and I mean, Quebec, by the way, is supposed to be one of the best places in North America for women condition. It's like people are convinced that in Sweden or Finland or in Iceland and all kind of places like that, it's completely equal. There's completely the same chances. When I came here, some people were telling me, nobody's going to have to tell you anything to tell you over there. They all solved it long ago. I said, well, I'll look and see. Maybe it's solved just as well as in Quebec, So, So it took me years to realize that my chances were not the same in society in general and in literature as well, because I am a woman. A system is something you swallow little by little and you don't even realize it. You don't realize your own alienation. There were a group of students, that has nothing, but I'm thinking about a group of students in North America. It was so great. From the West Coast, they took all the publicities for shoes or all kind of things like that, and they replaced the men by women. The women by men, I mean. And it looked so ridiculous. So you could not look at it without laughing your head off. But we pass by that in the metro every day, and we don't think it's ridiculous. And when you see that, you realize how shaming it is that we are so used to be presented in all kind of things for fashion, whatever, that we don't even notice it. We find it normal that they use a woman in a bikini to sell a beer, to sell tools for repairing your lawnmower or whatever, you know. So it's really something when you change your glasses. It's really hard to see again, like you saw before. Anyway, what came out of that study? Yeah, first of all, it did not strike me when I was in university that almost all the books that we studied were written by men. Although in our literature department, and I believe it is like that in most countries, it was very majorly girls that were studying literature in university. And it's also majorly women that go to libraries, and it's also majorly women that go to bookstores. But, well, we are going to get there. So women were less taught, so there were not many role models. And women writers were not talked a lot about in the media. I just didn't realize it, but it was like that. Today, I believe it contributed to the fact that I was not able to make the choice of becoming a writer when I finished my degree. I was not able to do that. I did not think of myself as a writer, although I had always wanted to do that, ever. But it took me years to make the decision. And after, when I finally did a workshop and finished something, I mean, my teacher almost was dragging the papers, you know, and me holding them. They're not finished, because nothing was ever good enough to be published. Some people have that. Some men have that too, but I think more women have that, really. I had a huge imposter syndrome, and it took me until I was in my 30s to decide to send something. You know, I did it like that. I thought, this is an obsession. Let's get over with it. I'll send it. They'll refuse it, and it will be finished. And then I can move on to something different. You know, that was my reasoning. So I sent it. I was really trying hard to be refused because I only sent it to 2 publishers. You know, that's not giving yourself much of a chance. And then a letter came in really fast after, like 3 weeks after. So I thought, well, that's fast for a refusal. And I opened it and I read it, and I thought, I didn't read that properly. And then I read it again. And when I realized I was accepted, I had to sit down in the entrance of my apartment, and I was thinking, how can that be that they accept my work? It was not like, wow, yeah, you know, right? The first thing was total disbelief. And I thought, they don't even know me, you know? That was the kind of reasoning I had. Yeah. So I did not see how well I had integrated the system, how alienated I was, not questioning things that I should have questioned. And years after, I still thought men-women parity in literature was okay. Or maybe I just didn't think about it. Whenever there was a problem, I thought it was because of the value of my work. So I used to hang around with three men friends when I started to publish. We wrote together for the national radio. We wrote a small poetry capsules, a little bit absurd. And then we all started to publish together. So I published one book. I had no articles. They had 2. And then I published a second one, no articles. And then I published a third one, and they started to have articles, and I had nothing. I think it's only after the third one that I started to ask myself why I not have articles, because it was really a problem when I wanted to ask for a grant. You need to have articles. I had nothing. And then I was invited in this festival. I was so excited. It was the first time I had to take the plane to go to a festival, and I was invited there, and it was great. It was beautiful in a maritime province of Canada. It was quite amazing. And and then the newspaper come out, and I was a young woman then. And if that was the front page, my photography was like that, you know. And it said, "The beautiful Nancy Erlange came to read her poetry, nya nya nya." And you could see I was in the microphone. They didn't say one word about my work. There was talking about, I was on the front page, and everybody else was discussed of inside. This was a real disaster and first of all, I was upset. And I could not figure out why. I looked and I thought, no, and everybody was going, "Wow, did you see your picture?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, why? I'm never satisfied with anything, you know. I have my picture big like that. I should be jumping with joy, I suppose. And when I came back, my friends told me, "You're never happy with anything, you know. I never had my picture big like that." And then it struck me. I said, well, I'm not a model. I don't want to have my picture. I want to talk about what I do, what I write, or my reading. But that's what I want. So, yeah. And it was the same when my first book came out also. I remember after some months, I got a report for sales, and I had sold like 200 books. And my first reaction was, how can that be? I don't have 200 friends to buy my book. You know, it did not cross my mind that maybe people would open my book in the bookstore and think, "Oh, wow, that's interesting. I'm going to read it," you know. So I always had that obstacle, let's call it like that. And now I have 12 books published in Quebec, Mexico, Japan. I'm translated in many languages. I've become a full-time writer for some years, but I still feel always a resistance inside of me when people ask, "Oh, what you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm a writer," you know, and I try to find a posture to say it, and it's still always like a little bit. It used to be, I was a massage therapist for many years. I never had problems saying, "Oh, I'm a massage therapist." That came out easily. But to say I'm a writer, like a statement, it's really hard. And one time I was with my publisher, and I told him I saw a guy there, and I really liked his work. And he said, "Oh," I told my publisher, "Oh, he's a real writer." So he looked at me, he said, "What do you mean he's a real writer?" I said, "Well, you know, first of all, he's not doing a job on the side to do something else. He does that like full time. He's really like in literature, like he's a writer." He said, "Well, what do you think you are? You're a writer too?" I said, "Well, not really." He said, "Come on." He said, "How many books do I have to publish of you that you start thinking?" I said, "Nancy, you have one thing published in a magazine or a book published. You're a writer. That's it. That's how you can socially describe yourself, you know." And it was like, yeah, so big imposter syndrome. I'm telling you all that because I'm sharing what men, women, non-parity as a consequence, I believe. And it took years until I started talking about it. And when I started talking about it, all of a sudden there was all these women starting to say, "Oh yes, me too. Oh yes, me too. Oh yes, this. Oh yes, that." So I think it's really important that these things are spoken. And so I created I can tell you briefly the result of the studies. It showed, so there was, the study was done with a full-time research assistant, and it covered production, that means publishing, funding, reception, like media coverage, and recognition, meaning literary prizes. And regarding production, it showed that it's 50-50, the manuscripts, 50 men and women, the manuscripts that are received by the publishers in Quebec. But if you consider the fact that there are so many women studying in literature, and there are more women in bookstore, and there are more women in libraries, you could expect that there would be more women sending out manuscripts. So in fact, it's 50-50. But after that, the ones that are published, it's 37% women for 63% men. So that's a big difference. And in the kind of literature that is considered to be more serious or more recognized, like essays and novels, it's largely more men than women. So regarding sponsoring, women receive more grants, but the money they receive is less. So I don't know if that has to do with the fact that they ask for less or that they are given less, because it also could be, I mean, if they don't send manuscripts, well, maybe they also don't they also don't apply for a large amount when there are grants. Welcome to you. Regarding literary prizes, women receive as many prizes as men, but they are more numerous receiving the prizes to which there is less money attached to it. The most prestigious prize, or the prices, the literary prizes that come with the biggest amount of money with it, are majorly given to men. Yeah, and when I said what is published, what is interesting also is that there are more women being published in poetry and children literature. Theater is about 50-50 of what is sent out and what is published. Regarding media coverage, 37% of articles about women's work versus 58% for men. And the men critics write largely more about men, but even the women critics, even they write more about women than the men do, but they still write more about men work. And yeah, and there is a quotation with stars in the literary magazines, and women only get 38% of the 4 stars quotation. So all the books that are supposed to be wonderful and great and fantastic, much more men than women. Although we talk less about women's work in the medias, we show them more often on the covers of the magazines and literary magazines and whatever, especially young women. You almost never see an older women writer on the cover of a magazine, but you often see the older men. They are the one with the mature work. I don't know. We have quite a few mature women writers too in Quebec, but they don't seem to make it on the covers that easily. And then the study that I thought that was, for me, that reminded me of my newspaper story. I was thinking, that didn't change much in all those years. And also the vocabulary used. They made a statistic study of the vocabulary used in the articles. So words like vast, efficient, dense, genius, intelligent, great, solid, remarkable are much more often used for men's work. Words like sensitive, delicate, or just are much more used for women's work. And strong, mastered, and moving are used about equally. So that's really interesting, I find, because it really fits like with the stereotypes. So we're not over that yet. So of the effect of that study for me, it finalized my decision to make that magazine, because I felt I've always been very involved with different social issues, environment being a big one. I was a very, very strong militant for water protection for many years, and I did like a zillion projects around protection of water. But I decided that for the years to come, I'm gonna put a lot of effort into trying to bring a positive answer to that problematic. So one thing I made the decision to do the magazine, and I'm still doing it, although so far we got 0 funding, which is really amazing, because after 4 years we really should have funding. And last year when I went to the big Montreal Book Fair, and of course, after all the years I've been publishing, I know about everybody in poetry from far or nearer, but I know most of them. And I talked to some of the women publishers, and they say, come on, you still don't have nothing for that magazine? That amazing, beautiful, so interesting magazine? And they told me, well, if you don't get nothing again this year, come and see us. And we're going to get together and we're going to write a letter. This is not acceptable. And I don't know what the reason is for that, but I believe it's going to change. I'm positive. I'm going to get a grant this year for this magazine. I need one, because that's why I have to organize 50 events a year, just to be able to finance it. I mean, it's not going all to that, but obviously I would do less if I would get a grant, and maybe I would have somebody to help me with administration and all kind of stuff like that. So, where am I now? Not about that. Okay. So, to finish, before, what I want to say is that I'm gonna, in a minute, invite Anne to come to the microphone and give her own perspective on men-women parity in literature and how it has affected her. I invite any of you who would like to say something about that to come and say it. And I am doing a call here during the submission, during the festival, for texts. If people want to send text on that topic, they can send it to us, and I will give them. We will be doing a collective publication about that, and the more countries we get, the greatest it is. And I think it's also easier. One thing I realized, because I did not talk about the Project Women of the North. Okay, so the Project Women of the North that I am doing now is a project where we are doing an exchange with Sweden. This year, it's on 2 year. Last year we did with Iceland. This year we're doing with Sweden. And in that project, we are exploring what it is to be from the North, from the perspective of women. So it has nothing to do with dog sleigh or going whitewater canoeing, going big rivers. Most people don't do that. They live in the country and they raise children or not and live there. So what is it to be from the North? So it's really interesting to see it from a woman's perspective. So we're bringing all that together, all kind of different voices, all kind of different visions, but very different from what we usually hear when people talk about Nordicity. And I used the occasion also to talk about men-women parity. I thought everybody would come and talk together and all that. And then I had all those complications, women saying, oh, well, I'm not sure. If you put everybody on the sofa and say, let's talk, everybody has something to say. And then you say, can you write down 250 to 500 words. Okay, that's not a master thesis. It's really short. Can you write about that? Well, I'm not sure I want to write about that. I don't. So there is still a fear of talking about that. And what is really, for me, mesmerizing is that it's even stronger with women that should not have that, because they have published so much and they have won prizes and tarara and all that. So they could share the experience, but often they don't want to. They are, I think, afraid to. And at the beginning, I was really getting upset. I thought, what is all that? And then I realized, well, everybody has the right of not wanting to appear. Everybody has the right to be afraid. Me, I remember one time in my life, I used to travel alone in the world, and one time I was almost killed on the street. It was a really bad experience, terrible. And for a long time after, I could not even go outside of my apartment alone in the day. So that's the impact of bad or traumatic experiences. And I think refusal for a writer, repeated refusal, is a traumatic experience for a writer. So I'm gonna invite now Louise's.
Thank you, Nancy. It's very interesting to hear this.
We see each other in Göteborg.
Yes, and I see you here too. I'm just going to another event.
All right. So see you. Louise is one of the poets who's going to be coming to Quebec in the fall, in September, and I'm organizing events so her and her two friends can present their work. So before I give the microphone to Anne, I wanted to say, if you look, it's really small now. It's hard to see, but the logo, I designed the logo myself. For Femme de Parole, so it's FDP, but it's also F, like femme, feminine, that is entering the circle of women. And if you look at that symbol, a circle with a line in it, it's le nombre d'or. I don't know what it is in English. It means like the golden number. It's something special, very special in mathematics. It has this symbol is called phi. It's the letter phi in Greek. It makes the sound F, like in feminine, but it also means research for balance. So it's the woman entering the circle in a search for balance, and that means that the men are invited in the circle too. So thank you for listening to all this. And now I give Anne. So Anne Miller, who's gonna talk now. She's a theater director, and she's an actress. And like me, she's been writing in situ here in Tranas about her perception of the North, but anchored in what she found here. And today she's going to share with you her vision about men-woman parity, mostly in theater, because that's the field she comes from. Welcome, Anne.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for the invitation for this writing residency. I should say it's the first time in my life that I write directly in English. So I hope you'll excuse the weird sentences and the accent. I'll be short. Okay. Nancy invited me. I already thought of this topic back in Quebec because we had an event around this event of parity, but I have to rewrite it in English and rethink it. So it's a little different, Nancy, from what you heard before. So, a feeling of imposture, you say? My personal approach is a constant struggle against the persistent feeling of a total professional and personal inadequacy. Why? Even here, I feel not too much of a writer, yet I have been writing since years. First thing I wrote as a teenager was a full notebook of poems of my own. Since I did all kinds of writing, hybrid writing, metaphoric writing for the too sensitive subjects, a symbolic writing because we like that, a writing for all kind of presentation. Most of the time, a writing that will be spoken, to be lived, and that has a body to feel the expression. Most of them have been performed and even edited. I did militant writing for the sake of French language in Quebec. Some of them had been stolen from me by some guys for their newspaper without my consent. Theater is my predilection path. I was born in an artistic family, mainly a theater one. I soon knew this is where my life will be experienced. There was no question about it, or choices to make. That was it. Theater gives action, life, and organicity to words. It's a celebration of words. Words, 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 says Shakespeare. But when I became a grown-up woman, did I always felt embarrassed to take my place in the artistic world? Yes. Notwithstanding, I had very professional and strong training in music, dance, theater, with all kinds of writing workshop, find myself a wonderful path in literary studies advanced programs, and never stop writing, but never find myself a writer. Often in theater, as in literary arts, women were generally expected to occupy jobs or professions that were still poorly recognized or often still among the least well-paid, actress or director's assistant. Lots of actresses. People like actresses, cute and young ones. Theater schools are filled with young women who want to be actresses, but not much men. I have been an actress, and I believe a good one. At the beginning, I was cute, a cute little girl doing lots of beer commercials. Amongst other things, I found in these works, I found myself very good at improvisation, and since never stopped of doing it. But some guys again, but I know some women are practicing that kind of appropriation. Well, they took away my improvisation and in their own creation without my consent again. Once, I had presented a full thought and written project to a director of a big theater who presented to its board of directors. One actor present at this meeting took my project and gave him to his young male friend who wanted to begin stage directing. And he did my project without understanding and without my consent. I was told it is often the case. As for myself, it has happened twice that my project was given to a man or also a woman. And above all, they help each other. A real boys' club. They are even favored by women when it comes to power. But why? In the classical dramaturgy, the main characters are mainly male characters. The writers are mainly men, even if they write about women. Lately, in the 20th century, there have been fewer experimental writing that portrays female heroine, mainly here with Miss Julie, you must know, from August Strindberg, or Edda Gabler from Henrik Ibsen, the Norwegian. Lately in our country, in Quebec, we had this tremendous success in the 70s with Les Belles Sœurs, written again by a man, Michel Tremblay. So we have lots of actresses, but not so many roles for them. So the competition is fierce. As is if for men, we accept them with less strict condition. When I studied theater, there were no stage directing courses at that time in Quebec. Despite this, lots of men became stage director just by just because they wanted to be. As for women, they had to, recently, got to this art by studying a lot and traveling a lot more, as I did. And I did a master in dramaturgy and directing actors, a patent in stage directing by the Conservatory of Montreal, some advanced studies in literature and written theater, to choose finally to deepen my experimentation around female figures in dramaturgy. Few women are now writing, and fewer are directing theater or stage directing in the young generation. I thought that things were changing slowly but surely. Lately, I was invited at a premiere of a show in a big theater in Montreal. And at the end, I was invited, as it is often the case, to take a glass of wine with some of other people of our artistic community. At one point, I was talking to an old friend, actress, a good friend of the director of the theater too. And there was also another actress with whom I was working at the time, who is now the director in l'Union des Artistes, the artistic union. The director came to us, and I congratulated him for many things, but especially for the next year programming, having put the text of one female writer, although it was in the small studio, not in on the big stage. That woman was not known in Quebec, but was having a great fame elsewhere in the French-speaking countries. And the director said, well, you know, I'm kind of forced to program some women's text because I won't have subsidies, though I don't understand whatsoever of the approach of the structure of females author proposition. Do you think we were choked? Yes. But since he was the one hiring us, we didn't say a word. I talked about it later on when I was a member of a project subsidies jury. Am I jealous? Of course. I'm upset. Why does my friend didn't have to study as much as I did, or my women friends did? And despite sometimes the lack of experience or training or even knowledge, they are taking most of the artistic place still. Not only are they 60% more present in these important positions, troops and stage director, writers as seen on the theater posters on 2018, they are better paid. For instance, I finally got my first very big break as a stage director. After having done many studios production, I had to take a negotiating agent because I was offered a third less than a bright green newcomer, as I had over 10 years of experience. Still, I was shy of doing it. Why? However, even today, still, when the women take the path of professional tasks traditionally assigned to men, the rules are become ruthless, and the road to achieving this is littered with major pitfalls. Even women that has power are harder on women. What we know, which is documented and verified sporadically in our society, is that although I have the impression that the quality of life of women in Quebec is among the best in the world, we have, unfortunately, a lot of studies that corroborates the facts that the integration of women's rights, their culture, their knowledge, their values is not yet to be completed. Thank you.
I don't know if any of you would like to share very informally your impressions about how it is in your countries. Would anybody like to come and share your vision? You don't have to agree with what we said or anything. I don't know. Would you like? Yeah, great. Thank you. So what's your name? Sarah from Wales.
That's it. Easy to remember. So I can't speak for Wales, but I can speak for myself. And for me, I think I haven't really framed it in the same way that you have. So when we first started having a little chat earlier, I was like, oh my God, yeah, actually. And we started talking about like the mental load. So for me, kind of like the barrier, I suppose, for being creative and kind of taking writing career further is all the other stuff you're trying to juggle. And I don't think it's definitely not just women that have to do that. But I suppose when I'm just thinking about it within the context of the last few weeks where the kids needed me for this and this and this, my mum wasn't very well, and like suddenly you're squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and then to take any time to do writing or sending anything off would feel like so selfish and impossible. So although like I'm very much in a place of very like massive privilege, like I've got, you know, somewhere lovely to live, and like I live in a really nice place, and you know, access to like loads of wonderful things, just in terms of that as a kind of concept and a barrier, it would be very much that I want financial kind of autonomy, that if ever I needed to leave, don't want to leave, but if ever I needed to leave, I would always want to be able to financially be able to support myself. And I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to come and say I'm a writer. I'm a teacher as well. as well. And obviously that's like quite, like it's all the same kind of energy, like give, go home, give. Yeah, so for me, I suppose that, yeah, the biggest barrier is time and mental load, and be able to create space to be just me, which is why I'm so grateful to Dominic for giving me like a few days where I can just be me, and kind of, I don't even know what that means, if I'm honest, anymore. I don't think I've answered your question, which is unsurprising because I'm not very good at that.
Do you believe there is non-parity in literature between men and women in your country, and how does it affect you?
So I suppose I know I'm not the only woman who would feel like this. I know we're not. We started a festival a few years ago in Llantwit Major, where I live, and it was 3 working mums, 3 teachers, 3 women, and you know, all of us were just like, but you know, by the end of it was juggling, and our families were annoyed with us, and like we're just trying to get everything done. So in terms of that kind of landscape, the men who are now involved, I don't know if that was their experience. I don't think so. Different stages of life on the whole, that the ones that are. And in a weird way, I've got some really like fabulous, really supportive friends who are men, and they're like, "Oh, Sarah, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Oh, have you sent this off? Have you done this? Have you done that?" And I'm just like, I love it so much that they're so kind and generous in their support. Like I'm like really lucky. We've got a great kind of generosity within Wales. I think really people want to, give people a hand up all the time, and certainly amongst women. I don't know. I think and men actually. People are trying to look after each other and promote each other, push each other forwards. And I suppose my fear is like people will get really impatient with me because I've just got to do all these other things and like can't always be doing all the wonderful suggestions that they have given me, I suppose.
Do you think that it is that they are sending their stuff because other people are suggesting it to them, or do you think they think about that themselves because they put themselves first, like they prioritize moving on with their work and all that?
Yeah, I definitely think the guys I'm thinking of, well, they don't have kids and they don't have the kind of everything that comes with that, which is wonderful, and I love my babies. Yeah, and part of it is me not prioritizing it because I've got to do all those things. But when I prioritize that as well as everything else, I just burn out completely.
But you did not always have babies, did you? Did you do a lot of all those things? Did you do it by yourself before you were a mother?
So I wasn't writing in a serious way before I had the kids. I've always written ever since I was really small. Always, like you, it would never be an option to be a writer. My parents were always like, "Oh, it's so competitive. This is so competitive. That's so competitive. This is," and I'm sad about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.